The massive spaceship cut through Earth's clouds like a falling star. Inside, 2,000 of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors sat in perfect silence. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were Deathworlders, beings who had survived on planets where everything wanted to kill them. Commander Zara Vex checked her weapon one last time. Her home planet Korath rained acid every day. The air burned your lungs if you breathed wrong. She had survived 23 years there before joining the galactic military. Now she was 42 and had conquered 12 different worlds. Earth would be number 13. 2 minutes to landing zone, announced the ship's computer. Zara looked around at her warriors. There was Kane from Pyros, where volcanoes erupted every hour. His skin was thick as leather from constant heat. Next to him sat Dr. Thane from Gamma Centauri, where radiation would cook a normal person in seconds. These warriors had seen horrors that would break ordinary minds, but they were excited today. Their mission was simple: land in Earth's most dangerous zone and set up a base. Their computers had scanned the planet and found the perfect spot, a green area called the Amazon. The scans showed massive creatures and deadly environmental hazards. It sounded like home to them. "Look at this data," Thane had said weeks earlier, pointing at his screen. "The life forms here are enormous. Some snakes grow longer than our transport vehicles. The cats are apex predators, and the environment itself tries to kill you with disease and poison." The warriors had laughed. They came from worlds where the mountains walked and the oceans boiled. How dangerous could Earth really be? Now the ship shook as it entered the atmosphere. Through the windows they could see endless green stretching in every direction. Rivers wound through the landscape like silver snakes. Storm clouds gathered overhead, crackling with lightning. "Looks peaceful," joked Kane, his gravelly voice echoing in the transport bay. "Don't let it fool you," Zara replied. "Remember what happened to the scout teams on Hellion Prime? Pretty planets can be the deadliest ones." The ship's engines screamed as they fought against Earth's gravity. Something was wrong. Warning lights flashed red across the control panels. "Commander!" shouted the pilot. "The storm is stronger than our readings showed. Lightning is interfering with our systems." Through the windows they watched bolts of electricity dance between the clouds. The lightning wasn't like anything they'd seen before. It moved with purpose, reaching toward their ship like fingers. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Thane. "Lightning doesn't behave that way. It's random, chaotic." But this lightning seemed to be hunting them. Each bolt came closer than the last. The ship's shields flickered and sparked. "Brace for impact," Zara commanded. The ship lurched sideways as a massive bolt struck their hull. Systems failed one by one. The lights went out, leaving only the eerie glow of emergency power. In the darkness, 2,000 warriors felt something they rarely experienced: uncertainty. The ship spun out of control, diving toward the green canopy below. Trees rushed up to meet them, each one looking bigger than the last. These weren't normal trees. They were giants, some wider than buildings, reaching toward the sky like the arms of sleeping gods. Impact came like thunder. The ship tore through the canopy, branches scraping against metal with sounds like screaming. Smaller trees snapped like twigs. Larger ones fought back, their trunks gouging holes in the ship's armor. When everything finally stopped moving, silence fell over the wreckage. Steam rose from twisted metal. Somewhere in the distance, strange calls echoed through the forest, sounds unlike anything in their databases. Zara woke up hanging upside down in her harness. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. Her advanced helmet display flickered with damage warnings. Half her equipment was offline. Around her, other warriors slowly stirred to consciousness. "Sound off," she commanded, her voice hoarse. "Kane here, armor's cracked, but I'm breathing." "Thane, my scanner's dead, but I'm alive." One by one, voices called out from the wreckage, but not enough voices. Too many seats sat empty, their harnesses torn and bloody. Zara cut herself free and dropped to what used to be the ceiling. The ship had landed upside down, its hull split open like a broken egg. Through the gaps, she could see the jungle pressing in. Vines already crept through the openings, growing faster than seemed possible. "Get everyone out," she ordered. "This ship isn't safe anymore." As the survivors gathered their gear and helped the wounded, Zara studied their surroundings. The jungle was unlike anything she'd experienced. The trees formed a canopy so thick that only scattered rays of sunlight reached the ground. Everything dripped with moisture. The air itself felt alive, heavy with the smell of growing things and decay, but it was the sounds that worried her most. Calls and cries echoed from every direction. Some sounded like birds, but bigger. Others reminded her of the hunting roars on Korath, but different somehow, more intelligent. "Commander," Thane called out, looking at his partially working scanner. "I'm picking up movement all around us. Lots of it, whatever lives here knows." "We've arrived." Colonel Nexus from the ice world, Absalon approached, his breath visible in the humid air. "My squad found the emergency beacon. It's damaged, but might be repairable. Problem is, we're scattered across 50 miles of this jungle. The crash spread our people everywhere." Zara nodded grimly. "In space battles, you could see your enemy coming. Here, the enemy was the environment itself, and it surrounded them completely." A new sound cut through the jungle noise, a low rumble that seemed to come from the trees themselves. The warriors raised their weapons, scanning for threats, but there was nothing to shoot at. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. "What was that?" whispered Vera, a young scout from Tempest Prime. Before anyone could answer, the rumbling grew louder. The very ground began to vibrate under their feet. Leaves fell like rain from the canopy above. And then, as suddenly as it started, everything went silent. The jungle watched them with 1,000 hidden eyes. Zara could feel it studying them, learning about them. This wasn't just a dangerous environment. It was something far more terrifying. It was alive, aware, and already deciding their fate. As night began to fall, the first lesson of Earth became clear. They weren't conquerors here. They were visitors in a world that had been perfecting the art of survival for millions of years. And like all visitors to the Amazon, they would either learn its rules quickly or become another layer of soil feeding its endless growth. The green cathedral around them pulsed with hidden life, and somewhere in that life intelligence watched and waited. The real test was just beginning. The first attack came at dawn. Sergeant Kane was checking the perimeter when something moved in the shadows between the trees. He raised his plasma rifle, scanning through the scope. Nothing, just leaves swaying in the morning breeze. Then the jungle exploded into motion. A massive spotted cat burst from the undergrowth, moving faster than anything that size should move. Kane barely had time to fire before 200 pounds of muscle and claws slammed into his chest. His armor, designed to stop laser weapons, cracked like an eggshell under the creature's bite. "Contact!" He screamed into his radio, rolling desperately to avoid the snapping jaws. "Big cat." "Bigger than the files said." The jaguar's eyes held an intelligence that chilled him. This wasn't a mindless predator. It was studying him, learning his movements, adapting its attack with each passing second. Zara and her team rushed toward the sound of gunfire. But by the time they arrived, only Kane remained. The jaguar had vanished back into the green maze, leaving behind claw marks and metal armor and a very shaken warrior. "Where's your squad?" Zara demanded. Kane pointed toward the trees with a trembling hand. "It took them, one by one." "Like it was playing with us?" Rodriguez fired 6 shots point blank, all hits. The thing just shook it off and kept coming. Dr. Thane examined the claw marks with growing alarm. "These cuts go through reinforced plating. The force required would be enormous. According to our data, Earth cats shouldn't be capable of this." "Well, someone forgot to tell the cats," Kane muttered, checking his damaged armor, but the jaguars were just the beginning. As the survivors spread out to search for their scattered comrades, they discovered that every creature in this jungle was wrong. The snakes moved like liquid death, appearing from trees, water. Even underground tunnels they somehow dug without making a sound. Private John from the crystal caves of Zarian found this out the hard way. He was filling his water bottle at a muddy stream when the water itself seemed to come alive. What he thought was a fallen log uncoiled into 30 feet of pure muscle. The anaconda wrapped around his powered armor and began to squeeze. "Help!" he gasped into his radio. "Can single quotes ... His armor's joints groaned under the pressure. Metal designed to withstand explosions bent like clay in the snake's grip. By the time his teammates reached the stream, Chun was unconscious. And the snake was gone. His armor looked like it had been put in a giant's fist and squeezed. "This is impossible," Colonel Nexus said, examining the crushed metal. "Our armor can take direct hits from tank cannons. How is a snake doing this?" "Doctor." Thane ran his scanners over the damaged equipment. "The pressure readings are off the charts. This anaconda is at least 3 times stronger than our data suggested. It's like everything here has been upgraded." But strength wasn't the jungle's only weapon. The real horror began when they encountered the tiny creatures. Bullet ants, no. Bigger than Thane's fingernail, somehow found gaps in their sealed armor. Their stings delivered pain unlike anything the warriors had ever experienced. Corporal Hayes from the acid storms of Melker learned this when a single ant crawled inside his helmet. Within seconds, he was screaming and clawing at his armor, begging his teammates to make it stop. The pain lasted for 6 hours. Hayes, who had once walked through a field of plasma mines without flinching, curled up like a child and wept. "How?" Thane whispered, studying the tiny ant through his scope. "It's just an insect." "We faced creatures that breathe fire and spit acid. How is this little thing breaking our toughest warriors?" The answer came from an unexpected source. As the 3rd day dawned, they finally saw the jungle's true masters. The humans, they appeared like ghosts, materializing from the green shadows without warning. But these weren't the primitive savages the Deathworlders had expected. These humans moved through the deadly jungle like they belonged there. Like they were part of it. Zara watched through her scope as a small group of indigenous people tracked her squad from a distance. They wore simple clothes and carried basic weapons, but their eyes held the same calculating intelligence she'd seen in the Jaguar. They studied the aliens like scientists examining interesting specimens. "Why aren't they attacking?" Vera whispered, crouched beside her commander. "Because they're learning," Zara realized with growing dread. "They're figuring out how we work." The humans moved through areas that would kill the Deathworlders in minutes. They stepped over venomous snakes that ignored them completely. They brushed aside plants that had already poisoned 3 warriors. They drank from streams where piranhas swam in feeding frenzies. Most unsettling of all, the dangerous creatures seemed to help them. Jaguars padded alongside human scouts like trained pets. Anacondas formed living bridges across rivers. Even the bullet ants appeared to take orders, swarming toward alien positions on command. "They're communicating with the animals," Thane reported in disbelief. "That's impossible. You can't just talk to wild predators." But impossible or not, it was happening. The humans used clicking sounds, hand signals, and something else, something the instruments couldn't detect. The jungle responded to their every gesture. Lieutenant Pike, from the radioactive wastes of Uranium Prime, discovered this when he tried to set up an ambush. He positioned his team in what looked like perfect cover, with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. But within an hour, poison dart frogs had somehow appeared in their hiding spots. The tiny, beautiful creatures carried toxins that shut down the aliens' enhanced nervous systems. Pike's team collapsed one by one, their advanced biology helpless against Earth's chemical warfare. The humans appeared moments later, not to attack the paralyzed warriors, but to study them. They examined the aliens' armor, weapons, and equipment with the curiosity of children exploring a new toy. Then they simply melted back into the jungle, leaving the Deathworlders alive but helpless. It was more terrifying than any battle they'd ever fought. These humans could have killed them easily, but chose not to. They were being tested, evaluated, measured. "They're playing with us," Kane said later, after Pike's team had recovered. "Enough to move, like cats with mice." The worst part was the realization that came next. As the survivors regrouped and compared their experiences, a horrifying pattern emerged. Every attack, every encounter, every seeming accident was connected. The jungle wasn't random at all. It was coordinated. "Look at this," Thane said, spreading out his maps. "Every assault has driven us toward the center of the jungle. We think we're choosing our own path, but we're being herded." Zara studied the patterns and felt ice in her veins. They're not just defending their territory. They're moving us exactly where they want us to go. As night fell on their third day, on Earth, the survivors huddled together in a small clearing. Around them, the jungle pulsed with life and intelligence. Eyes watched them from every shadow. Calls echoed between the trees, not animal sounds, but signals being passed from one group to another. The Deathworlders finally understood the truth. They weren't facing primitive humans or simple animals. They were fighting an entire ecosystem that had learned to work together over thousands of years. Every plant, every creature, every human was part of a vast living network that treated the aliens like an infection to be contained and eliminated. The real war was just beginning, and they were already losing. By the fifth day, half of the 2,000 warriors were gone. Not all were dead. Some had simply vanished into the green maze, their radio signals cutting off one by one. The survivors learned to fear the silence more than the sounds. Dr. Thane made the discovery that changed everything. He was examining a sample of morning dew when his scanner started screaming warnings. The water droplets weren't just water anymore. "Commander," he called to Zara, his voice shaking, "you need to see this." She approached his makeshift laboratory, set up under a torn piece of their ship's hull. Thane pointed to his microscope display with a trembling finger. "The water is alive," he whispered. "Not just bacteria or microorganisms, something new. Something that's specifically designed to attack our biology." On the screen, tiny organisms swam in perfect formation. They moved with purpose, clustering around samples of alien tissue and dissolving it within seconds. "That's impossible," Zara said. "Evolution doesn't work that fast. It takes millions of years to develop new organisms." "Not evolution," Thane replied grimly. "Adaptation. The jungle is actively creating new weapons to fight us. Every day, these organisms get better at breaking down our equipment, our armor, our bodies." To prove his point, he dropped a piece of their emergency rations into the water. Within minutes, the food completely dissolved. Then he tested a fragment of their armor plating. "Same result? The entire ecosystem is learning about us," he continued. "Sharing information. Plants are analyzing our chemical signatures and producing new toxins. Animals are studying our movements and developing new hunting patterns. Even the bacteria are changing to target our weaknesses." The proof came that afternoon when Private Torres from the steam geysers of Vapor Prime started screaming. She had been drinking from their purified water supplies, water they had cleaned with their most advanced filtration systems. But somehow, the microscopic hunters had found a way inside. Torres' enhanced immune system, designed to fight off radiation poisoning and chemical burns, collapsed in hours. Her body began breaking down from the inside as the new organisms ate through her. Cellular structure. The medics could only watch helplessly as their strongest warrior dissolved like sugar in rain. "How is this possible?" demanded Colonel Nexus, watching their medical scanners fail to identify the attacking organisms. "Our biology is completely different from Earth life. How can their microbes even recognize us as food?" The answer came from the trees themselves. That night, as the survivors huddled around their failing equipment, they noticed something impossible. The jungle was glowing not with fire or electricity, but with a soft blue-green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The light moved between the trees in patterns, flowing from plant to plant like blood through veins. "Bioluminescence," Thane breathed, watching the light show with scientific wonder and growing terror. "But coordinated. The entire forest is acting like a single organism." As they watched, the light patterns changed whenever one of them moved. Step to the left, and the glow shifted. Raise a weapon and the pulses quickened. The jungle wasn't just watching them, it was thinking about them. It's a neural network, Thane realized. The plants are connected underground. Root systems, fungal networks, chemical signals. The whole forest is like a giant brain, and we're the problem it's trying to solve. The brain was winning. Every day brought new horrors specifically designed to counter their advantages. Plants that had been harmless yesterday now released spores that ate through their air filters. Trees that provided shade in the morning dropped sap that dissolved their equipment by evening. Sergeant Kane discovered this when his plasma rifle simply stopped working. The metal had been slowly eaten away by what looked like ordinary morning dew. His backup weapons suffered the same fate within hours. The jungle is customizing its attacks, he reported to Zara. It's like fighting an enemy that rebuilds itself every night to be better at killing you. But the most terrifying discovery came when they found Corporal Reeves from the poison swamps of Toxic 7. He had been missing for 2 days when they located him in a grove of flowering vines. He was alive, conscious, and completely helpless. The vines had grown around him like a living cage, keeping him fed and hydrated while slowly changing his body chemistry. Mushrooms sprouted from his armor, and his skin had taken on a greenish tint. When he spoke, spores drifted from his mouth. "It doesn't hurt," he said in a dreamy voice. "The forest is just curious. It wants to understand how we work. From the inside." They tried to cut him free, but the vines regrew faster than they could cut. Worse, Reeves begged them to stop. "Don't you see?" he pleaded. "We're not enemies. We're just different kinds of life. The forest wants to make us part of it, to improve us." Dr. Thane ran emergency scans on their trapped comrade. His brain chemistry is changing. The spores are rewriting his neural pathways. In a few more days, he'll think like the jungle instead of like us. They were forced to leave him behind, but not before he delivered a message that chilled them to their bones. "The forest knows about your ship," Reeves called after them, his voice already sounding less human. "It knows about your beacon. It's waiting for you to try to leave." That's when the real test begins. The survivors pressed on, but the jungle's judgment had already been passed. Their numbers dropped from hundreds to dozens as the environment itself became their enemy. Plants that looked identical to safe species turned out to be perfect mimics that released different toxins. Water sources that tested clean in the morning became deadly by afternoon. Lieutenant Vale from the crystal caves of Prism Prime learned this when what appeared to be harmless moss suddenly erupted into thousands of biting insects. The creatures weren't there one moment and swarming the next, as if the jungle had manufactured them on demand. "The ecosystem is improvising," Thane reported as they treated Vale's hundreds of bites, "creating new species in real time to counter our defenses. We're not fighting a static environment anymore. We're fighting something that evolves faster than we can adapt." The psychological pressure was even worse than the physical dangers. Every night, the glowing network pulsed brighter, and the survivors could feel intelligence pressing against their minds. Some warriors started talking to the trees, convinced the forest was trying to communicate. Others reported dreams where they saw through the eyes of jaguars and anacondas. "It's getting inside our heads," Vera whispered during one sleepless night. "I keep hearing voices in the wind, telling me to put down my weapons, to trust the forest." Zara felt it too, a gentle pressure at the edges of her thoughts, offering peace if she would just surrender to the jungle's embrace. The temptation was real and growing stronger each day, but the most horrifying realization came when they found the bones. Ancient skeletons scattered throughout the forest, some human, some clearly from other species that had never evolved on Earth. All were partially fossilized and covered in the same glowing fungi that now sprouted from their equipment. "How long has this been going on?" Nexus asked, examining a skull that looked distinctly alien. "Thousands of years," Thane replied, dating the fossils with his scanners. "Maybe longer. The Amazon has been testing visitors for millennia. We're just the latest exam." As they stared at the ancient bones, the truth became clear. They weren't the first aliens to crash in this jungle. And judging by the evidence scattered around them, very few had ever passed the test. The forest pulsed with patient approval, as if congratulating them for finally understanding their situation. They weren't conquerors or explorers anymore. They were students in Earth's oldest and deadliest classroom, where graduation meant survival and failure meant becoming fertilizer for the next lesson. 23 survivors remained when Zara made the desperate decision. Out of 2,000 of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors, only 23 still breathed. Their equipment was failing, their ammunition running low, and the jungle grew. Smarter every day. "We're going back to the ship," she announced during their morning briefing. The decision surprised no one. They all knew staying meant slow death by 1,000 cuts. Colonel Nexus spread out his tattered map, marking their position with a bloody finger. 12 miles through the densest part of the jungle. "The ship's beacon is still transmitting, so we know it's there. But getting to it ... He didn't need to finish. They all understood. 12 miles might as well be 12,000. Every step would be contested by an enemy that knew their every weakness. Dr. Thane studied his readings with grim fascination. The biological activity around the crash site has increased by 300%. Whatever's waiting for us there, the jungle has been preparing for weeks, but they had no choice. Their emergency rations were gone. Their water purification tablets couldn't keep up with the jungle's evolving toxins. Most importantly, their minds were starting to crack under the constant pressure of knowing. They were being hunted by an entire ecosystem. The march began at dawn. Zara took point, her damaged armor still sparking from yesterday's encounter with carnivorous vines. Behind her, the survivors moved in tight formation, every weapon trained on the green walls surrounding them. For the first hour, nothing happened. The jungle seemed almost peaceful, with normal sounds of birds and insects. It was the calm that terrified them most. "Too quiet," muttered Kane, his scarred face constantly scanning the canopy above. "It's planning something big." The attack came at the 2-mile mark, but it wasn't what they expected. Instead of jaguars or anacondas, the trees themselves began to move. Massive roots erupted from the ground like grasping fingers, trying to trip and entangle the survivors. Branches bent downward with impossible flexibility, swinging at them like clubs. Vines shot out from every direction, attempting to drag warriors into the undergrowth. "The forest is fighting us directly," Vera screamed, cutting through a vine thick as her waist. "The plants are alive!" Lieutenant Pike from the radiation zones used his last plasma charges to burn through the attacking vegetation, but for every plant they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The jungle had unlimited reinforcements. "Move! Keep moving!" Zara shouted, leading them through the chaos. "Don't let it pin us down!" They fought their way forward, step by bloody step. But the jungle had learned from their previous encounters. The plants now moved in coordinated waves, forcing the survivors towards specific paths while cutting off their escape routes. "We're being herded again," Nexus observed grimly, noting how every blocked path led them deeper into the forest's heart. By midday, they reached a clearing that made their blood run cold. The space was perfectly circular, surrounded by trees that formed natural walls. In the center, strange formations of rocks created what looked like an arena. "It's a trap," Thane whispered, his scanners going crazy with biological readings. "Look around us. Those aren't random rock formations. They're positioned for maximum killing efficiency." The stones provided cover for attackers while leaving. The center completely exposed. Worse, the ground was soft and muddy, making quick movement impossible. Every tactical instinct screamed at them to turn back. But behind them, the jungle had already sealed their retreat. Thick walls of thorns and poison ivy blocked their path, growing faster than they could cut through. They were trapped in nature's perfect killing ground. 3 days, Zara said quietly, studying their position. "That's how long it took them to drive us here. 3 days of careful herding, making us think we were choosing our own path." The indigenous humans appeared on the surrounding ridges like ghosts materializing from mist. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all armed with simple weapons that had proven devastatingly effective against alien technology, but they didn't attack. They just watched with those calculating eyes, waiting for something. "What are they waiting for?" Vera asked, her voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. The answer came with the sound of rushing water. Somewhere upstream, a dam had broken? Or, more accurately, had been broken. The muddy ground began to flood as the Amazon River changed course, flowing directly into their trapped position. "They're flooding us out," Kane realized with growing horror. "But why?" "The water will trap them too." Dr. Thane checked his scanners and went pale. "The water isn't empty. Lifeform readings are off the charts. They're driving every predator in the river straight toward us." The first caimans appeared as dark shapes in the rising water. Then came the piranhas, churning the surface into foam. Electric eels followed, their discharges making the water itself a weapon. And swimming among them all, anacondas the size of subway trains, but the worst was yet to come. As the water reached their waists, new creatures appeared, things that had never been catalogued by human science. Fish with teeth like chainsaws, turtles with shells that opened to reveal rows of spines, water plants that moved like jellyfish and stung like wasps. "The jungle created these," Thane gasped, watching. His scanner readings spiked beyond comprehension. "New species, designed specifically to kill us in water. It's been breeding them for weeks." The survivors climbed onto the rock formations, firing down at the aquatic army below. But their weapons were nearly useless. The creatures had been designed to absorb energy blasts and shrug off projectiles. "We can't win this," Nexus said flatly, watching an electric eel the size of a bus surface near their position. "They've had weeks to prepare. We walked right into their final exam." For 3 days and nights the battle raged. The survivors fought with desperate courage, using every trick they'd learned on a dozen Deathworlds. They rigged explosive traps from their remaining equipment. They created defensive barriers from fallen rocks. They even managed to tame some of the smaller creatures using techniques learned from other planets, but they were fighting the entire Amazon ecosystem, and it had home field advantage. Every hour brought new horrors. Plants that shot poisonous thorns from underwater. Insects that could fly through their energy shields. Fish that could leap 20 feet out of the water to attack. The humans on the ridges never moved, never helped, never hindered. They simply observed, taking notes on every tactic the aliens used, learning, always learning, on the third night. As their numbers dwindled to single digits, Sergeant Kane made a discovery that broke his heart. While searching for ammunition, in his pack he found his emergency communicator. The one designed to contact their home fleet in case of disaster. The signal was strong, clear. Their rescue ships had been orbiting Earth for days, waiting for word. "We could call for pickup," he told Zara quietly. "Orbital bombardment could clear a landing zone in minutes." Zara looked at the device, then at the indigenous humans watching from the ridges. Those calm, intelligent faces that had studied every move they'd made. "And prove we learned nothing," she replied, understanding finally dawning. "This isn't about killing us. It's about testing us, seeing if we're worthy of their respect." She looked around at their desperate situation, trapped in a flooded killing ground, surrounded by creatures that shouldn't exist, watched by humans who had turned their own world into the ultimate weapon. "We failed," she whispered. "We came here thinking we were the predators. But Earth has been running this test for thousands of years, and we're just the latest students to discover we're not as smart as we thought." The water continued to rise, and new monsters continued to emerge from its depths. But for the first time since landing, Zara understood the rules of the game they'd been playing. The question now was whether understanding would be enough to save the few who remained. 6 months later, 5 figures stumbled out of the Amazon rainforest. They barely looked like the proud warriors who had entered. Their armor was gone, replaced by simple clothes woven from plant fibers. Their advanced weapons had been traded for wooden spears and stone knives. Most shocking of all, they moved like the jungle people, Silent, careful, respectful of every step, Zara led them. But she was changed beyond recognition. Her military bearing had been replaced by something softer, more aware. She no longer scanned for threats because she had learned to listen to the forest's warnings. The jungle spoke to those who knew its language, and she had become fluent in whispers. Behind her walked Dr. Thane, carrying samples in containers made from hollowed gourds. His scientific instruments were long gone, destroyed or absorbed by the jungle's relentless adaptation, but his eyes held knowledge that no scanner could have given him. He had learned the forest's secrets through months of patient observation. Kane followed, his scarred face now marked by intricate tattoos applied with plant dyes. The indigenous people had adopted him after he saved their children from a flash flood, using techniques learned from his volcanic homeworld. The markings told stories of his trials, each symbol representing a lesson learned the hard way. Colonel Nexus walked with a slight limp from where an anaconda had crushed his leg. But he moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood that fighting the jungle was pointless. Victory came from cooperation, not conquest. His tactical mind had been rewired to think like the ecosystem itself. Young Vera brought up the rear, her eyes constantly watching the trees. Not for threats, but for signs. She had become the group's scout by learning to read the jungle's moods. When the forest was angry, she knew to find shelter. When it was welcoming, she knew where to find food and water. They reached a small settlement at the jungle's edge just as the sun set. The villagers stared in amazement at these strange visitors who emerged from the green hell where nothing civilized could survive. But the 5 survivors showed no excitement at seeing modern buildings or electric lights. If anything, they seemed uncomfortable. "Medicos," called one of the villagers, recognizing that these people needed help. "Doctors." "These people need doctors." The local physician, Dr. Santos, had seen many things during his years treating jungle guides and river traders. But these 5 puzzled him. They were clearly not local, yet they moved with the confidence of people born to the forest. Their clothes were handmade but showed remarkable craftsmanship. Most puzzling of all, they seemed healthier than most people he treated, despite obviously having lived rough for months. "Where did you come from?" he asked in Spanish, then Portuguese, then English. Zara answered in perfect local dialect, the words flowing like music. The jungle had taught her more than survival. It had taught her to communicate with all living things, including humans. "From the deep forest," she said simply. "We were lost. The people there helped us find our way." Dr. Santos examined them with growing amazement. Their reflexes were perfect, their breathing deep and controlled. Whatever had happened to them in the jungle had made them stronger, not weaker. But their eyes held depths he couldn't fathom, the look of people who had seen impossible things. The villagers offered them real beds, cooked food, and clean clothes. The survivors accepted gratefully but asked permission to sleep outside under the stars. They had grown uncomfortable with walls and ceilings. The open sky felt more natural now. That night, as they sat around a small fire, they finally talked about what they had learned. The words came slowly, carefully, as if the jungle itself was listening. "We were never their enemies," Vera said, quietly, watching sparks drift toward the stars. "We were students who didn't know we were in school." Thane nodded, holding up one of his samples, a small plant that glowed softly in the darkness. "The forest has been running the same test for thousands of years. Species arrive thinking they can conquer it. Most die, a few learn to survive. Even fewer learn to belong." "Those bones we found," Nexus added. "Aliens from a dozen different worlds, all trying to claim the Amazon. All failing the same test we almost failed." Kane touched his tattoos, remembering the indigenous elder who had marked him. "The people there aren't primitive. They're the graduates. The ones who passed the test so long ago that they became part of the forest itself." Zara stared into the fire, seeing the jungle's glowing network in every flame. "Earth isn't a world to be conquered. It's a world that tests every living thing. The strong don't survive here, the wise do." 3 days later, a rescue ship finally arrived. The Galactic Council had sent their fastest vessel after detecting the survivors' emergency beacon. Captain Voss, commander of the rescue mission, couldn't believe what he found. 5? He asked incredulously. Out of 2,000? What happened down there? The survivors looked at each other, then at the jungle stretching endlessly toward the horizon. How could they explain what couldn't be understood, only experienced? We learned, Zara said simply. The medical bay on the rescue ship buzzed with activity as doctors tried to understand what had happened to the survivors. Their biological readings were unlike anything in galactic databases. Their nervous systems showed new neural pathways. Their immune systems had adapted to fight diseases that didn't exist on any known world. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to be in constant communication with something. Brain scans showed patterns that suggested they were receiving and processing information from an external source. When asked about it, they simply said they were listening to the forest's voice. Impossible, declared the ship's chief medical officer. You're 300 miles from the jungle. How can you still hear it? Thane smiled sadly, holding up another of his samples. Distance doesn't matter. We're part of the network now. Once the forest accepts you, you're connected forever. During the long journey back to Galactic headquarters, the survivors worked together to compile their report. But how do you document the impossible? How do you explain that an entire planet had been testing visitors for millennia, selecting which species deserved to survive? Their final report was just 3 pages long. Most of it consisted of a single recommendation repeated in different ways: mark Earth as forbidden territory. Not because its inhabitants were weak, but because they were the ultimate survivors in a universe full of Deathworlds. The humans call it the Amazon, Zara wrote in her conclusion. But its real name should be the Graduate School of Survival. It teaches lessons that can't be learned anywhere else in the galaxy. Most students don't survive the curriculum. Those who do are changed forever. The Galactic Council read the report in stunned silence. They had sent their most dangerous warriors to conquer what seemed like a primitive world. Instead, those warriors had been humbled, educated, and returned as ambassadors for a form of life they barely understood. What do we do now? Asked the council president. Zara stood before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds, her simple clothes a stark contrast to their elaborate uniforms. In her hands, she held a small plant from the Amazon, a gift from her teachers in the deep forest. We learn respect, she said, setting the plant on the council table where it began to glow softly in the artificial light. We accept that not every world is meant to be conquered. Some are meant to teach us how to survive in a universe that's bigger and more dangerous than we ever imagined. The plant pulsed gently, as if agreeing with her words. And somehow, every person in that room felt the jungle's presence. Patient, ancient, and infinitely wise, Earth remained unmarked on the galactic conquest charts. But it gained a new designation: teacher. And sometimes, when the universe grew too harsh and civilizations forgot how to survive, a few brave souls would journey to the Amazon to take the ultimate test. Most never returned. But those who did brought back the most valuable treasure in the galaxy, the knowledge of how to live in harmony with a world that could kill you if you learned to listen to its lessons with respect.